Welcome back, everybody, to your daily update on the state of the Malazan Empire. And we're continuing with Memories of Ice, Book 4, Memories of Ice. And things are heating up nicely. I mean, not a big surprise, but for me at least, but holy shit. But first of all, the knitting project, right? And it's getting longer and longer and longer, and I can't properly show you anymore. I feel like it's if I stand up, it's below my ass at this point. Um, so I really need to figure out how to do the yeah. But look at this. This is like actually seriously almost looking good at this point. And I might have hit on a kind of working like hypothesis of how to do the whole neck and hood and cowl and whatnot thing. I might have hit on one of those. We'll see. I'll think through it some more, and well, you'll be live. You'll be the first to actually witness how I fuck up. Because here's the funny thing that I didn't tell you. It's yeah. The point is, of course, you can change stuff that you knitted. You can just like draw out your needle, take down row after row after row, and then put all those loops back on your needle. You can do that if you can actually see what you're doing. So I have basically one try to actually get this done properly, or yeah, I can start all over again, which I don't want to do. And I hope you understand why. So we'll see how that works, but I'll talk more about my idea on how I think it might actually work in a couple of days. I suspect, like, I don't know, next week. I'm pretty sure I'll be done by next week, which will be sometime in House of Chains. Maybe Monday, Tuesday, something like that is when I expect that I'll need to actually think hard about the whole shoulders, neck, whatever situation there. We'll see. Anyway, let's get started. Cheers. And boy, oh boy, do we have stuff here. I mean, I'm on my third reread now. My third read through is technically the second reread, I think. So yeah, on my third read through. And I'm almost done with the book. I've got the last chapter, chapter 25, I think, is that left, which an audiobook is like 4.5 hours long. So it's a lot of time still going. And this will be an interesting point. But obviously, spoiler, if you have not read Memories of Ice up until the last chapter, there's going to be some heavy spoilers in this one. So don't watch this unless you have read chapter 24, like the second to last chapter, because otherwise you're fucked. Anyway, this is all about why healthcare matters even in fantasy worlds or something like that. Because, and here's the spoiler, Whiskey Jack is dead. And I don't really mourn him that much because he's not one of my favorite characters for a lot of reasons that I'll need to get into at some point. But yeah, he is dead as either a result of toxic masculinity or bad prioritizing. And I don't want to go into which one it is. I suspect it's more the idea of pushing stuff aside because of overwhelming duties and a sense of duty and stuff like that. Although, to be fair, when you look at how healing works with magical healing works, he could have done it any time he wanted. Like, really, it wouldn't have taken like hours, or even like it wouldn't have slowed down the whole thing at all. But he didn't, and this hits really close to home for me because I've run around with a knee injury for the last 2.5 years at this point because I'm an idiot. Uh, so maybe my dislike for Whiskey Jack is because I feel some affinity to his stupidity there. I don't know. I buckled my knee a couple of years ago while wandering around in the middle of the night on a campground on a festival, and if you've ever been to that kind of festival, you know it's on like a meadow, and there's holes in the ground that you can't see. I mean, even other people can't see because it's usually there's cows grazing on there. It's pasture. There's like holes in the ground because of rabbits or moles or whatever. And I stepped into one and my knee twisted and this shit hurts real bad. And idiot that I am, I didn't do anything about it for the last 2.5 years. And like it kind of became better, but sometimes I twist it again. For example, when I accidentally overstepped and fell from the platform onto the train tracks in Frankfurt main train station in Germany, which is something I can't recommend. It really is not fun, even if you're doing it on the part where trains can't reach because you're like beyond the end of the track and you can't actually, you know, get terribly damaged by approaching trains. But holy shit, don't do that kind of thing. So yeah, I feel the pain there, and I kind of, every time I read that particular storyline, I'm like, oh shit, maybe I should ask my local healer if he can actually do something about that knee, and then I kind of forget again. Anyway, this was not what I wanted to talk about, but it kind of happened. All right, let's get into other stuff though. And we're gonna circle back to the whole Whiskey Jack debacle in a minute. But first, something that I wanted to talk about, and I kind of promised that I'll talk about yesterday. Like I promised yesterday that I'll talk about it today, is what I'm trying to say here. And that is the whole discussion that Whiskey Jack and Humber Tor have about the Malazan Empire as conquerors. There's a lot to unpack in that whole debate, like whole short discussion they have. Like first of all, Whiskey Jack says that there's wisdom in, and holy shit, what's the word he uses there? I can't remember because I'm an idiot. It's basically boils down to there's like there's wisdom in variety or cultural variety or whatever you want to use there, because it's of that this and strength, and that's something the Malazan Empire has embraced by embracing all these different religions and cultures, and that has in the end actually helped the Malazan Empire grow because it adapts and it embodies or takes into its culture like the different cultural successes or inventions that it encounters, and that is ultimately something that really helps. Now, this is obviously a very interesting discussion on how colonialism, how imperialism works in a way, or can work in a way, that enforcing your own cultural rules and things and customs onto a different culture has disadvantages, because you create, and we've seen some of that in Deadhouse Gates with the rebellion in Seven Cities, it creates resistance. It definitely creates resistance if you do that, if you enforce your cultural norms onto a different culture. Now, there may be situations where that is necessary, and we're going to talk about those at some point as well, so don't worry. But in general, adapting and being willing to learn, even as a conqueror, is something that strengthens your own position, strengthens your own position there as an imperial power. So that's something that we learn about why the Malazan Empire is overall rather successful. It's like, yes, they conquer, they're military conquerors, but what they do in the end is they give relative freedom to the peoples they have conquered and subjugated, and take in the positive aspects of those conquered civilizations. And that's a good thing, right? That's only part of it, because then we have that thing where Humber Tor goes and talks and says to Whiskey Jack that at some point the Malazans will show up and conquer and try to attack the Barghast. And Whiskey Jack explains that this will not be the case, because they have treated, and they will just like send envoys to the Barghast and offer the Barghast to join the Malazan Empire. And if the Barghast will not accept that, they will just ignore them and leave them alone. And this sounds like super magnanimous on the surface, but there's like an addendum to that, and that it's that Whiskey Jack also pulls out that one, and that is until the Barghast reconsider, and that's the trick there. That's the kicker there when we look at how cultural imperialism, or what you might call cultural imperialism, works. Superiority, or imagined superiority, because you remember in Deadhouse Gates, I'm only going to stay in the Malazan universe for a moment, and then we'll generalize a bit more. And you remember in Deadhouse Gates those flashbacks of Mappo Runt? Yes, when he was talking about that, like the Trell people who are originally nomadic kind of ended up in those villages and getting drunk and, I don't know, being assimilated further and further into whatever civilization we're talking about back then, because that's like hundreds of years ago. So we don't need to. But the general process of having a perceived higher civilization, higher culture nearby, drawing in people, especially younger people, and from like less cultured or whatever, like from the outside, drawing them into your higher, like with higher living standards and all that stuff, drawing them into your like influence, your realm of influence, and away from that other culture, is something that happens. Of course, you have those like opposite forces where some people decide to become ultra conservative and go even hardcore on your old traditions and stuff like. Of course, you have all of that happening, but the overall process, there is a word for that, which is acculturation, which basically means taking on the culture of someone and someone else over time. It gets thrown around a lot in anthropology, I suspect, in history as well. I first encountered it actually in a kind of discussion about the Hellenistic age and about acculturation there, like the Greek Hellenistic culture being spread all the way to almost India in a way over time, not only by just not only by military force, but also just by its value of more material riches in a way, or less strict cultural norms, and those being like lodestones to younger, more mobile, upwardly mobile members of a different tribe or different cultures. Like you go there. I mean, we look at today. It's why you have migration in a way. It's like you want to go there because there's better jobs, less oppression by cultural norms and so forth. It's like, yeah, you have gay marriage and well-paid jobs and healthcare. We're gonna come over to you guys. That's how that shit works all the time, and that's how the Malazan Empire over time, even while not actually attacking, or forcefully incorporating the Barghast tribes into its realm, into the empire, would over time, through sheer superiority is probably the wrong word, but yeah, through just offering less strict cultural norms and a lot of chances and opportunities for financial and whatever gain, would over time bleed dry and bleed thin the Barghast civilization, until those just willingly give up. And we obviously get situations where that is shown even more. We have like our first short mention of the Seti at some point when we're meeting, what's his name, Shanks, the one major that got mentions for like a couple of minutes. So he's a Seti, or depends, like, and the Seti being a nomadic tribe, or a couple of nomadic tribes and nomadic people from Kwantali, and has apparently completely been subsumed by Malazan culture. And he's, wearing the dress, but he actually had to get it made by a theater company, like the seamstress for a theater company, because that culture is completely lost at this point. So yeah, when Whiskey Jack makes that magnanimous offer, and explains to Humbrol Tor that if the Bargas don't want to be part of the Malazan Empire, they won't be until they reconsider, has a rather darker undercurrent there. And I just felt that I should mention that, because that stuck out when I read it. And it's like, it's one of those things that we actually get shown in the Malazan Empire, in the Malazan Book of the Fallen in general, is that military might and military conquest is just one way of imperialism. I mean, at some point it's actually get mentioned there are financial, cultural, and military arms of imperialism when it comes to also like religions or economic power like those. It's actually mentioned also relatively recently in one of those chapters in Book 4, and I just keep forgetting who said it back then. But yeah, anyway, just felt that it's important to actually mention that part. So here it is. Now let's look at a bunch of things that I feel are also interesting. Oh yeah, one short slip up that is really not that important, but probably an editing mistake. Maybe it's even fixed by now. I don't know. In the audiobook, at some point after Picker gets actually promoted to be lieutenant, she's once again called Corporal Picker at some point, and that's just like, I don't know. That's an editing mistakes. A mistake I can totally forgive, or even if it's just a reading mistake in the audiobook. I wouldn't need to check, and it's not that important, right? Anyway, it just stuck out. I'm like, hey, wait a second. She was promoted, wasn't she? Yeah. But later on, she's once again called Lieutenant Picker, so who cares, right? Anyway, let's look at a bunch of other things. The battles, the battles around the those forest encampments that I spoke about yesterday already, but now the Panyan Seer actually sending out soldiers to recapture those ditches and stuff that the bridge burners conquered yesterday. And we have our first large-scale trench warfare battle there. And once again, for me, the whole the parallels sort of to like our reports that we have from like First World War is really strong. You have this like magic being employed like a weapon of mass destruction on both sides. And yeah, I know it happens in Gardens of the Moon in a way, but this time around it feels different in a way, because maybe it feels different because it's up close and we actually have met more of the characters that get destroyed and characters that employ that kind of power. We have those waves of sorcery just annihilating entire swaths of country, like rolling up the hill, destroying everything, killing everybody, and so forth. That is just brutal and like has nothing to do, like literally nothing to do with any kind of romanticized images of warfare. Well, some of those we're going to get into that in a minute, but well, some of those Malazan tactics with the Marines and everything feel more like a fantasy version of the Vietnam War. This feels really like brutal 1915, 1916 trench warfare with people just being annihilated for the sake of annihilation, and whoever loses more people in the end has lost, kind of thing. And that just like stuck out in its sheer like mechanized brutality in a way. We also see Quickben do a lot of shit this time around, like actually unveiling a lot of warrants and doing a lot of stuff. I mean, he's still kind of tricky and doing like illusions and stuff like that. We need to talk about the illusion part, where he apparently manages to conjure up a couple of demons that are only illusory demons, but seem to be still able to actually kill hundreds of soldiers because yeah, apparently that works the way it works that way, that if you believe hard enough into some kind of illusion, believe hard enough into the in that, then it actually can kill you in a rather graphic manner. Or maybe I completely got that wrong and they all just get up after the whole thing, but it looks very much looks like this worked, and people just die because they believe they're being killed by a demon that is wholly imaginary. um Also, Quickman shoots around wraiths that steal souls, which is kind of brutal. But, well, apparently, I mean, we already know that he talked to Hood and has made some kind of deal with Hood there, which is cool. One other thing, I don't know, maybe I should just drop it now because I kind of thought about that for a minute recently. Like, it's still in book 3 at some point when we hear that Poliel, mistress of plagues, the goddess of plagues, has allied herself with the crippled god. And I don't want to go into that right now. I just felt that the name Poliel was done really well. I mean, I know there's, like, I don't know, interviews with Stephen Erickson talks about how he comes up with names and stuff like that. But I recently read like a book on, I don't know, Greek magic and stuff like that, because why not? And the importance of, like, when it comes to plague and like any kind of sickness in more ancient belief systems, is that it's usually caused by pollution. And pollution is a very, very different concept from today, but pollution is always like the cause of maladies, of all kinds of maladies of the spirit and the flesh. And just like the similar sounds of polyel and pollution is just something that I found, like, it's just well named, is what I'm trying to say here. So anyway, ignore that. It's not really important at any point. It just, like, it sounded really good is what I'm trying to say here. All right, so what else did I want to talk about? Yeah, the entering of the bridge burners into, and Dujak's host into Coral with the qualls. Just, that's the point when I'm like, what I meant with, like, it feels more like more Vietnam than anything else. Like, those qualls of the Moran, they're basically helicopters, aren't they? And it's like everyone just, like, sending those troops in and infiltrating places like that. There's not much to actually talk about here. It just feels really cool. It shows how you can actually take on things, because what that allows you is to take tropes and forms, not only tropes, but general imagery and other cool things from that kind of, like, war military fiction, and take those and use them in your fantasy setting in a way without it being jarring. And I feel that's something that I've always, or always, but yeah, recently said, is like, it helps if you read outside your own fields. Like, those things sound cool, and they are cool when you can take in those inspirations and those influences into your fantasy world and still make it feel fantasy. If you've read some military fiction about Vietnam or whatever, or just watched some movies on that or whatever. So yeah, that works. And it just the way it's described, them landing there, those, like, the whole thing of them being split up in squads and doing their things, just really cool. Also, I just love the fact how when Paran and Whiskey Jet, oh, not Whiskey Jet, Paran and Quickban and Spindle and all the others are, like, get up onto that tower of the Sears fortress, and how they distract those vulture demon things by Spindle just using this side effect of his warren, and how it was set up at the beginning of Memories of Ice. You remember, like, really at the beginning, you have this more comedic scene than anything else when he is basically when Paran is asking Spindle to unveil his warren to clear them a path through the city to get out to that meeting. And that now pays off, because at the moment he's like, oh, he's got like a twisted use of his warren, but he's a mage, and apparently animals, fall into panic when as a side effect of how he uses his warren. Although we never get told what his warren actually is, so who the fuck knows? But apparently, yeah, he does that, and then they now use that side effect as a weapon against those vultures, because it's like, yeah, unveil your warren, those vultures will just panic and won't be able to use their weird demon powers to kill everybody. So yeah, then we also get some more of those like bomb run images of the Moranth doing bomb runs and doing aerial combat and shit like that, which once again, it just gives you the opportunity to, use things from more modern warfare in your fantasy genre without it seeming out of place. Which is something that, for example, because, I mean, we've spoken about that before, the Glenn Cook Black Company influence is, when you read the first book of the Black Company, you have all those they're just called the Taken, they're not Soul Taken, it's stupid. And the Taken having those flying carpets and doing also all the kinds of weird aerial combat and doing also these like dropping off people and shit like that, to have these elements of more modern warfare in your military fantasy novel and world. So yeah, that's just something that's cool to have in there. And I just remember that yeah, basically that those Taken with their carpets and shit like that basically serve the same function in the Black Company that here the Moranth serve in a way. So yeah, but cool stuff all around. All right, so what else? The element of chance. It's once again one of those things that anyone who has ever thought about history or historiography has probably come up against, and it's like made clear here in this 1 second when Whiskey Jack is talking to Corlad, and then it's just even spelled out that if she had like looked up again for like a minute longer, she would have seen the qualls fly into Coral and drop the bridge burners, and things would have changed completely. And while it says like it even uses like the coin was spinning one way around from the lady to the lord and shit like that, but the general thing that comes up here is that like chance plays a terrible role in everything, and you cannot predict things, and sometimes shit just happens because bad luck. And that's something that this part of the story really shows up, is yeah, how much random shit just fucks up people's plans. And on the one hand, you have these ideas like Paran and the bridge burners using like also random ideas to deal with that, kind of adapt to circumstances. On the other hand, you have situations where like, okay, someone didn't look up, so they didn't see that. Now 100 or 1,000 people are dead. Deal with it. That's just how the world works. So yeah, we have that. And then we obviously need to talk about the whole Kadar's betrayal, death of Whiskey Jack, the Talani Mass Itkovian situation. We need to talk about that some more. And once again, we see one of those things that Malazan is really good, because it's set up pretty well most of the time. We see how small seeming personal petty choices and decisions then have huge repercussions and huge effects, and not in the best way. And while knowing that in your personal life can really make you hesitate when it comes to making choices, it also helps to be aware of that. So there's like two things in there. First of all, we have obviously Calor's betrayal. And while there's more to be said about Calor, obviously, to realize that Calor taking up the offer of the crippled god and then betraying everybody to kill Silver Fox is rooted in two things, and one of them is a perceived lack of appreciation. Like, I mean, basically, he does that because he's pissed off because people are not taking him as serious as he believes he should be taken. You know, the whole, all over the times, like, Calor, and he's a dickhead, don't get me wrong, Calor's a dick. And he behaves like a dick, and everyone is just like ignoring him or making fun of him or telling him off, and that's a problem because, on the other hand, we're talking about fighting a war here, and Calor is someone who knows a lot about fighting wars. I mean, the guy's been doing basically nothing else but that for 100,000 years. He's kind of good at it. And while he may be a dickhead, it still pays to actually listen to him when it comes to stuff like tactics and shit like that. And he felt, you know, unappreciated in that area, and then the crippled god made him an offer that showed him that someone appreciates his thing. And so out of this feeling of injured pride, he decides to betray everybody. And then you have this thing with Night Chill, which is basically a mix of fear, fear obviously, because of Night Chill being part of Silver Fox, and also once again injured pride, which something like everyone is like, oh shit, we should have seen his betrayal coming. It's like, yeah, you should have, in a way, but it's set up well in a way that he's got good reasons. I mean, I don't want to be Calor. I'm just saying that if I were Calor, the things that he did sound rather reasonable from his point of view. They don't make him a good person, hell no, but they definitely are. They definitely make sense. So there's that. He's still, you know, fundamentally flawed, and we know that. And the reason why he's fundamentally flawed is something that we need to get into in another situation as well. I mean, he's probably not gone forever, even though he's now taken away by our good friend, the crippled god. So yeah, we have that in there. I actually, another thing that I really appreciated is how short that duel between Calor and Whiskey Jack is. It's literally not the big, I mean, we have two really good fighters there, but it's literally not that whole thing. We don't get like a 10-page epic combat, like description fight scene of them fighting it out and having all these. And we know that Steven Erikson can do that. Don't get me wrong. We could have had a long description of fencing prowess, using all these special words about how people fence that I have no idea how to use because I don't fence. And I shortly after Riposte, I kind of give up when it comes to fencing vocabulary. But we don't. It's like they exchange like 2-3 swings, and then Calor stumbles backwards. Whiskey Jack steps up front, and his knee buckles again, and he's dead. We're done. I just love the fact how this makes death seem so random, cruel, brutal, and also unimportant. Not unimportant, but, you know, it takes all the drama away from it. It's not a dramatic, powerful, pathos-laden, bombastic scene. It's not your Boromir getting another arrow and yet another arrow and yet another arrow. No, it's just like one guy stumbles, the other fucks up his knee, and then he's dead. That's how life works, and I just appreciate how that one happens. Also, I just love the fact that it's like one of the most brutal emotional punches in the series up to this point happens a whole, like, one chapter before the end. And once again, this is like the largest chapter in the book, where like there's like 10% of the book missing so far at this point. more than 10% missing at this point. So that's just really well done, because how is Erickson gonna top the fact of just killing Whiskey Jack out of the blue? How's he gonna do that? I mean, not out of the blue. We get all these like not premonitions, but all these like build up to how he's dying with this whole stupid fucked up knee situation through the entirety of the book. Actually, we got the first hint of that in Gardens of the Moon. But yeah, so that's just a brave decision, and we're going to talk about it tomorrow, how he delivers on that or does not deliver on that. But until, like, I mean, for the end of today, I want to just quickly talk about that other thing. Selfishness is one of those big things there, and lack of communication. I mean, it's a general thing. We all know that lack of communication means fuck ups everywhere. But I want to talk about the thing with Silver Fox, the Talani Mass, and Itkovian. We don't know exactly how that's going to end at this point, because not exactly, but we know that something is going terribly wrong because of, once again, lack of communication and selfishness. So the entire like Silver Fox, maybe, and so forth situation means that while we were at the second gathering, Silver Fox lashes out against Brand Cole and has that situation where because she didn't tell anyone about her plans and so forth, but she's like really hurt about, like, lashes out because of all of that pain of her new existence with those different characters within inside her, and that whole stuff, right? And because of that selfishness born out of pain and all of that, she denies the Talani Mass the release they want. And that's the thing that now opens, because that gives a lot of despair to the Talani Mass, right? And they want an end to the whole existence, to their like world and everything. And she denies that, even though they bend their knee to her and beg, basically. She doesn't do that. And now someone comes and offers that. And it's not her, it's Itkovian, and he offers to take all their pain accumulated through like 300 millennia, and all the pain and sorrow that's in there, and he just offers to take that. And if Silver Fox had not lashed out in pain and defied them because of selfishness and personal pain back then, they wouldn't have had any reason to like agree or give themselves to Itkovian. So once again, that's one of those things that I meant when I said that there's like seemingly small choices and decisions, and even like petty decisions, because what Silver Fox did was kind of petty, even though the other thing there is that she obviously had a plan how to deal with all of that, and she just fucked up because she didn't tell anybody about it. We know that again because of the whole wolf situation. She's like Calor is attacking her, and he's like, Talan, come to my help, and they're not there. We need to figure out why they're not there and who is responsible for that, and we're gonna figure that out tomorrow, I suspect. But yeah, once again, the idea of like that small petty choice she made at the second gathering has huge ramifications now. And we'll see how that works. But in the end, it might just mean a really tired army fighting a bunch of undead dinosaurs with swords for hands. And we all know how well that works, right? Anyway, I think that's it for today. I'm going to go back to knitting and finishing that book so I can talk about it tomorrow. And then we'll get into House of Chains. Won't that be fun? Spoiler, it won't be all fun. Anyway, let's see what happens now the Whiskey Jack is dead, and people have actually to listen to like accept leaders that are proving their worth as leaders within the books and not outside of them. So we'll see how that works out, and we'll see what happens to our good friend the Panion Seer. And there's still a lot of stuff unresolved. The question just is, can it actually, raise the tension, build it all up to a climax, or are we already in a 4.5 hour denouement? I used a French word. All right, ignore that. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, cheers.